Really nice to see you all. Very warm welcome. It's a really nice turnout, and actually this is a really poignant topic at the moment, particularly because we're thinking about coming out of the lockdown situation. And I heard something interesting on the news the other day around people kind of having concerns and anxieties now about coming out of the lockdown. So this the presentation title certainly speaks to a very topical moment, I think. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Francisca Veale. She is an academic supervisor for doctoral students at the University of Gloucestershire, and she's also working as a practice educator for social work students at Bournemouth University and Solent University. So I'll hand over to you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I will be sharing my screen. And can I do it slideshow? You can all see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. There we go. Okay, the topic of my presentation today is COVID-19, the loss of a sense of coherence. It has to do, I have been 99% working from home since 23rd of March. I always have worked some bit from home because as an academic supervisor to the University of Gloucestershire and me living down in Weymouth, Dorset, 3 hours away, and my students are generally international students. So I have always done supervision via Skype, what it was then. So I'm used to a certain extent to work from home the whole time, but not now the whole time. And in particular with the practice educating of social work students, that has become a real issue because most placements shut down on the 23rd of March last year. And we had to think very creatively how we could, continue students on placement, teaching, learning, and resorted to Zoom and all sort of things. And we all have sort of got familiar with this now to a certain extent, but there is positives and negatives. And I just wanted to look with this presentation, which I also have written a paper, which hopefully will be ready to submit soon as well, looking at the impact of COVID, and in particular the sense of cohesion. So that's sort of my main focus. The layout of the PowerPoint is, I haven't been able to finish it. It's far too much text on the slides. My apologies. I'm embarrassed about that, but I'm sure it's okay. So started from where I'm coming, I've been obviously working with lots of colleagues who are equally working from home. And I will be looking to, today at the ways how people undertake work and learning during COVID, work or family life balance, linking it to the sense of coherence, ability to manage and combat stress, mental health and well-being, gender inequality, promotion of health and well-being. And I will briefly introduce or link to the concept of salutogenesis. And then I hope to finish with strategies to foster resilience. What will not be discussed, which will be another paper, another presentation, the impact of children, young people, or people who have lost their employment, or people who have lost someone due to COVID. There's so many aspects, and I know that my title is very broad, COVID and the loss of cohesion. It has so many aspects. So I have to exclude some aspects. So just looking in general trends, working and learning from home, the National Office for Statistics published in March 2020 that 60% working from home since the lockdown. That is quite an increase to previous figures. Previous figures were sort of on the 30%, so it has more or less doubled. And obviously in certain areas of work more so than in others. So frontline staff obviously cannot work from home. And it's more sort of the service, not the service industry, the sort of industry who has to do with teaching, learning, IT. These are the areas, HR, most HR departments all are working from home now. Social media companies such as Twitter, for example, have allowed their employees to work permanently from home. Newspapers are talking about following this trend as well. Facebook has, I think, said that all their staff will be working from home from 2023. So, and I will come to it why it is sort of convenient for companies to let people work from home. So learning and studying from home is a major challenge, as those in particular who have children, young people at home, as well as for teachers, because many households only have one device and not 3, 4, 5 devices, and having to supervise their own children homeschool teaching from home is sort of a double, triple burden to a certain extent. Interestingly enough, I found this study in Canada and Australia. Universities had sort of mixed responses from their staff, how they enjoyed or didn't enjoy teaching from home. And it depended largely on the subject. Obviously, practical university courses were much more difficult to deliver online, whereas other courses were quite easily which were maybe just knowledge courses, easier to deliver from home. But it also depended on the IT skills and abilities a teaching staff had to familiarize themselves and feel comfortable to do this delivery. Professor Baker argues that the society, in fact, that's an interesting point, is in fact returning to ways of working from home similar to pre-industrialization, where everybody was working from home. It was the norm. And even so, it was very different, obviously. A shoemaker, baker, or whatever, who would be working from home and would have the family around. There weren't, for example, no requirements for having all these electronic resources available and so on. And children would be part of the working life and wouldn't have necessarily the education. But what I found interesting in her quote was that it's important having a shared set of rules concerning the use of different spaces. And I thought that's quite important and relevant to sort of, peacefully coexist, she's talking about. Which again, in our households these days, we are used to go out to work, go out to school, go out to university. So now that everybody's working from indoors, suddenly home office space has become quite crowded. And that's something I will be touching on as well. So, the term new normal has been thrown about, and people have to adjust to their regular routines, how they are living, working, learning all from home under the same roof for in particular the times of total lockdowns. And if you look at the concept of a sense of coherence, it has been thrown out of balance, because the way we work and the meaningfulness of our work has become, and the manageability of our work and learning is now in a totally different context, and we have to find new routines in our lives. Some people have found the whole lockdown, or finding the whole lockdown and learn work from home very challenging. In particular, as our ways, what we can control and what we can't control is limited. And if you look at Covey's concept of the circle of control, he's saying that what is happening around us with the COVID, for example, we cannot control. So we have to look at the inner circle of what we actually can control to keep some sort of stress reduction and trying to keep our mental health at bay. So there's clearly a divide between those who can work from home and those can't work from home, and those who have been furloughed. And some people obviously find it very challenging if they have no choice and have to work at the front line. And levels of stress have risen, in particular amongst frontline workers and the NHS. There's also the aspect of productivity. And originally, some people expressed fears that people working from home would just sort of, watch daytime television all day, wouldn't do any work. But actually, the opposite has taken place based on a recent study by the Phillips, that actually people feel that it is this duty of having to be present, having to be able to answer the email straight away. Because if you don't answer your email straight away from working from home, people think, you're lazy, you're not doing anything. So their research found that actually the length of working days has increased by 8.2%, and that the number of meetings people has gone up by 12.9%, and that I totally can relate to that. I now have back-to-back meetings. I don't have the same downtime like I used to have, because I used to go and meet people in places, drive around, and driving in the car was sort of my downtime. Now people expect you, when 1 minute meeting finished, to just move on to the next one, back-to-back. Lunchtime is not that I had much lunch times before, but people frequently ask you for a meeting at between 12 and 1, and you think, but you can't say no, because you're at home, and there's this sort of expectation. And the fact is that actually productivity has gone up. The other issue is that people working from home find it very difficult to switch off. And initially, I had my laptop on the kitchen table, and it was always present. And when it became more apparent that I will be working much more in the long-term future from home, I emptied my spare bedroom and set up home office. Because this way I can walk away from the work. When it's on the kitchen table, I can't walk away. And because of that, people find it difficult to rest between back-to-back meetings. The mental and cognitive demands and the focus on these virtual meetings, looking at the screen all the time, actually has made it very difficult for people, and they get more tired, including myself, and it is actually physically quite strenuous to sit all the time. Plus, with these Zoom meetings, we only see part of the person. It's much more difficult to pick up on facial expressions, for example. If I want to see anybody's faces, I need to get really close, because he is that tiny. So that is quite concerning as well. The changes of the office environment. So many people, many employers have allowed so that their staff can work from home. And it's quite interesting that actually big companies are saying, why would we want in the long run to have expensive office spaces in the big cities in London or wherever, New York, Tokyo, when actually we can have people working from home. We have the electronics and the virtual meetings available. So a lot of offices or big companies already have said they will not go back to the same way of working. And this quote here from the Barclays boss, the notion of putting 7,000 people in a building may be a thing of the past. And, so it's the real estate, the cost of having office buildings is so horrendous. And a lot of companies will downsize by requesting people to work from home. So a lot of offices that will go back or have gone back have sort of employed a type of COVID safe environment with partitions, with social distancing, enhanced hand hygiene, temperature measuring, and what might have been seen intrusive in the past, people actually accept these safety measures for their own safety of not catching the virus. Office architecture and layouts in large plan open offices are being revisited, and so to reduce any virus spread. So as I sort of alluded earlier, the home office is a challenge for many. You know, how many rooms are available for families to have individual rooms to do their working or learning from home? How many electronic devices are available? Is the internet connection strong enough to have 3-4 people using the internet at the same time? And based on a BBC report, architects and estate agents have found that more and more people are looking for larger houses where they can incorporate a home office. And one of the most important things is then also that the new home has sufficient internet speed. Another factor for those who cannot move or don't have the room for home office, there's the question, who gets the spare bedroom or a quiet space to do their work? And quite often it is women who miss out. It's usually the men who get the home office. And I know I'm stereotyping here, but there's some research backing this up, that generally it's women who step back and give up their office space for the children or the husband. And I'm sort of running through a little bit because I know I've prepared far too much as per usual, as I do. So looking at gender inequalities, it's mainly women who do the homeschooling, who do the sort of general household chores. And if they have to hold up a full-time job at the same time, it's near impossible to do this all unless both partners share the work with home educating. And I can say firsthand account, some of my social work students actually have stopped the social work studies because they haven't been able to work from home, learn from home, homeschool the children and the husband at home. So they are deferring because they haven't had childcare either, because the rules have been, if both partners can work from home, then they are not seen as key workers and weren't eligible to childcare spaces. So it has been very tricky. The other thing which I found really interesting, what I read about, that some companies are actually encouraging their female workers to make more of an effort. And if you look at the third bullet point here, according to the employment firm Slater & Gordon, 1 in 3 women were asked to wear more makeup or change their hair or dress more sexily while working from home and interacting in video calls with customers. I mean, if that isn't sexism, that, unbelievable. And then the other thing I found, more than 1 in 3 women have experienced at least one sexist workplace demand since the lockdown started. The most common ways bosses justify the illiterate comments about dress include saying, help to win new business. It is important to look nicer for the team and it would be more pleasing to a client. So because of the lockdown and the lack of social interaction, working in teams and offices, there have been an increase in mental ill health and some physical ill health and well-being. And in particular, reports of, for example, Burnout Britain, that a lot of people feel overworked, stressed, and disproportionately high, which is disproportionately high amongst women. And based on what I just said, that women are so much more multitasking, the mental ill health of women has unproportionately risen. It used to be men who were slightly higher working men than women, but this has been now become a real issue. So also a study from the University College of London found that people feel much more stressed out and much more worried, to catch the pandemic, the virus, but also with the ongoing stress factors. So mental ill health has risen during the COVID period. So come back to the sense of cohesion. I struggle to pronounce that correctly. I do apologize. as mentioned earlier, it's the sense of cohesion, and I just wanted to make it sort of more visible. Is our life, is it manageable, is it meaningful, and is it comprehensible? And with all the changes of our working, learning lives, living in a worldwide pandemic, it has become much more difficult to have the sense of cohesion. So the uncertainty of the pandemic and the uncertainty if and how and when we go back to whatever is normality with school and work and offices, are we going back in the same place? Are we expected to work constantly from home? All these uncertainties have had an impact for many people on the sense of coherence as well as their general health and well-being. And one very interesting bit here at the bottom, I found research by Williams, research by Chica, Seiden, and Williams, the last bullet points, and she looked at the impact on the brain and in particular on the memory during COVID. And it appears that the brain finds it challenging to differentiate and categorize memories without any variations in routine. So one day seems to be merging into the next. Before we had social occasions or markers like birthdays, holidays, and the brain categorizes these events. And even so, we still have birthdays, but we don't have the parties. We don't have office Christmas parties, or we don't go on holiday in the same way like we used to do before. So the brain really struggles to make sense of events and categorize them. And I found that really interesting. I just happened to remember the last time I was on holiday a year ago, and then everything else that happened in last year, I really struggled to put in order what happened when without constantly looking at my diary. Yeah. So, and that's again, the sort of meaningfulness and comparability and manageability is impaired in our brain because that struggles to make sense of events. Very brief, I don't know how familiar people are with the concept of salutogenesis. This is quite an old concept, and it's, in short, the definition is prevention is better than cure. And the NHS has been using this concept through, for example, five a day steps to well-being, encouraging healthy eating and lifestyles, and so on. So it's easier said than done. You know, prevention is better than cure when you're actually forced into a situation where we have very little opportunity to change the virus. You know, we can wear face masks, we can use hand gel, we can, you know, social distance, but there's very little else we can do. However, it has become really important to look after our health and well-being. And there have been on television these, what's his name, Joe Wicks, you know, physical exercise, the government saying you should go out once a day, because it's so important that the physical aspect of healthy eating, healthy living also impacts on our mental health and well-being. So one important aspect of how we can sort of keep ourselves more healthy is actually fostering resilience. And resilience is a long-term concept. In short, resilience is the ability to bounce back from the adversities of life. Some people are born more resilient than others. However, those who don't have this resilience potential find it potentially harder to learn it. And they're having healthy lifestyles and keeping body and mind healthy is an indicator for people being more resilient. So I'm going to skip this one. No, I'm not. Sorry. So in particular, in work environments, it's really important that managers and staffs and colleagues are trying to be supportive to each other and to include people in decision-making processes. If people are feeling included and part of a decision-making process, then they take ownership And then any change that happens, which has been happening through COVID in the last year or so, if people are part of the decision-making process, then they are much better at coping with any ongoing changes. So what Margolis and Stoll said, we need managers in particular, or team leaders, or we need to move away from a reactive, if something goes wrong, what are we going to do, problem solving, to a proactive, yeah, prevention is better than cure. That's where the salutogenesis links in. So proactive, looking at, thinking ahead what situations, what problems may occur and how we can respond to it in a proactive way, and involving those who are impacted by these ongoing changes to be part of this. And I liked what they said, resilience regime is a long-term fitness plan, not a crash diet. And they place a responsibility on managers, on team leaders to foster resilience and help people. So there's some good initiatives going on. For example, I know of some universities, they have every Friday afternoon a 1-hour wellness, staff wellness session, for example, where people can talk about anything, just not work. And that's really difficult. When I first joined one, I really struggled not to talk about work and talk about, yeah, nice things, taking the dog for a walk, yeah, sort of, or some teams do quizzes, and it's these sort of wellness check-ins are so important to be able to switch off work. And people who have a higher resilience potential usually find that easier. People with a lower resilience level, which is quite often linked to learned helplessness, to Seligman, find it much more difficult to adjust to stressful situation. Just moving on, I'm aware of time. I need another sort of 3 to 4 minutes and then I'm done. So moving on to some strategies and resources for well-being. There is lots of information these days available on the NHS platforms, on Public Health England. Local authorities have their own mental health promoting websites. In Dorset, where I live, we have steps for well-being. You can do free training courses. There's lots out there. The question is if people actually access these resources to help promote well-being and become more resilient, or if they're encouraged. So these are just some sort of, in my view, common sense, but not common sense. If you just look at the find a space to chit chat, so make time, which you usually would have in an office when you go and make a coffee to the photocopier. Nowadays, when we have a Zoom meeting or whatever virtual platform, we go straight to the agenda, we go straight to what we have to talk about. We do very little chit chat. And to have some time either in these meetings or after meetings, or schedule some catch up chit chat time with the colleagues and just think, how are you? Yeah. The other thing is where and when you can to sort of actually meet people. And that can be done through going for a walk rather than meeting in the office. Other simple things as, and when we continue to work from home, simple things of getting dressed. And as I find it so hilarious, I really went out and had to buy a few more jogging pants because, you know, sitting all day, the jeans really cuts in. So I went out and I had to laugh about myself. So, you know, but then what was it, which not Oscars, whatever it was, you know, somebody was wearing a nice dress shirt, you know, the award ceremony, and then he lifted his leg, but jogging pants. And, you know, it's really funny, these way how we adapt. But getting dressed is really important because you get yourself ready for the day. Friend of mine, she puts every day her makeup on. She said, because then I have my office hat on. Yeah. I've given up on most of the makeup. Just anyway, the other thing is establish boundaries. Sort of, you know, when you look at your computer and when not. And more people expect you to answer at the weekends, in the evenings. And in some cases, I do that. And with others, I draw a very clear line, because I know if I give them my little finger, they expect me to answer an email at midnight, you know. Take regular breaks, which I've been really bad with to start with. I do try now to sort of, you know, have a break. What has helped that my office is upstairs and the kitchen is downstairs. Whereas when I was working in the kitchen, I didn't take a break. So now I walk away from the office, which is really good. Set routines, stick to them, make dedicated workspace, give yourself a break, stay connected, set boundaries. It's all the same sort of tips that are given. And I'm about to finish now with something which was written in 2014, and that had to do with work, home, and work-life balance. And I found this quite interesting. Knowledge of the positive and potential damaging ways of coping with stress and the work-home interface can impact on work-life balance, and how psychologically flexibility can increase satisfaction with both the the home life balance and the work-life balance. So, you know, looking after ourselves, promoting our own well-being in a selfish way helps us to hopefully maintain our mental health and well-being and productivity. So looking back, lots has changed. People individually, families, students, workers have to make changes in the way they live and work and learn. Many companies have made changes, and there will be the legacy of COVID, no doubt, that certain ways of working will never change again. I'm an external examiner for Birmingham City University, which is a 4-hour drive away from here. I never, ever will go back driving up to Birmingham for a 1 hour, maximum 2 hour exam board, yeah, because I can do it from home. We had to do it and it works. So I will never, ever go to Birmingham again. So that, in my view, that's a good thing. Nothing against Birmingham, but, you know, 8-hour traveling for an 1.5 to 2 hour meeting. It's just so uneconomic and so stressful and very bad for the environment. So last and not least, I will finish with what the OECD predicts, that working from home, which in other words also has been known as teleworking, that's the term they use, will become a permanent fixture for many sectors. And therefore it's so important to look after the well-being of the employees. So public policy and cooperations among social partners are crucial to ensure that new, efficient, welfare improving working methods emerging during the crisis are maintained and developed once physical distancing is over. To maximize the gains for productivity and welfare inherent in the use of more widespread telework, governments should promote investments in the physical and managerial capacity of firms and workers to telework and address potential concerns for worker well-being and long-term innovation, related in particular to the excessive downscaling of workspaces. So that's me. And then there's 3 or 4 slides of bibliography. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Francisca. Wow, actually, it's such a nice comprehensive review of all of the issues. You know, we hear about some of these things, they come up in the media, but you just pulled it all together so nicely and with so much information and so many references for us to kind of follow up. So thank you. Really, really interesting. It's funny because just earlier today, I was actually going into a meeting and I just sat there and thought, I don't know where I am. I said to the person, I didn't know what meeting I was in. And I thought, how ironic, given that I'm in the same room every day, but most of the time I don't know where I am in the world of hopping from one Zoom meeting to a team chat. So yeah,
the physical reference is missing again for our brain, really important.
Yes.
If you enter a certain office, there's a name or a certain building, your brain can comprehend. Yeah,
it's so fascinating. The neuroscience part I thought was fascinating. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll open it up to questions, comments, thoughts. There will be many, I'm sure. Jenny.
Unmute, unmute, unmute.
Unmute. This is going to be the quote of the year as well, isn't it? You're on mute.
Right, I've been unmuted. I think I was muted because I was crunching a polo. I think that was fascinating, Francisca. Thank you very much, and explains lots of reasons why I felt increasingly afloat on a dark sea for this last lockdown. And I was interested in what you said, Carly, too, about getting to a meeting and then think, where the hell am I? Because the other thing that is missing, surely, when you go into a virtual meeting like this one, is that just as a teacher, you can walk into a classroom and think, there is something going wrong in this room. You don't know why, you haven't heard anything. You walk into the room and think, my God, this is going to be a ghastly lesson. And that must be the same with a meeting, because you've only got these tiny little pictures. Do meetings, do you think, actually acquire that sort of pack mentality that you can sometimes go into a meeting and think this is going to be really hostile, but the pack can't do that because we're all separated? Or is it just because we can only see people in these little pictures that we don't get the feeling of the meeting? I must say I found talking on this much more difficult because I didn't have a feel of how everyone was reacting. I mean, has anyone done any work on that, about how the dynamics of a meeting work when it's on Zoom, and how that is contributing to our feeling of not being, that the place isn't coherent, we're not coherent with it anymore? Sorry, does that make sense?
I can give you some practice examples. For example, I've been doing some teaching for Solent University, which was supposed to be a group of 48 students. And I said, I'm not doing that because, I might as well speak to a fire extinguisher. I can't see 48 people unless I have a massive thing. So I asked if we could split it down at least in 2 groups. And then there was further teaching. I then requested, I want small groups of 6 people because the content required interaction and discussion. You cannot have a discussion with 48, 24. And that's where we have to be more creative, more flexible. But that also requires more work, because the other thing, even if I have a large group and can put them in breakout rooms, as you can, I can hop in and out of the breakout rooms, but it's not the same when you're all in the same room and you can walk between the tables of groups. So we have to, or I have requested to change certain ways of working where I say I'm not teaching to 48 students. They might as well just read a book. It's, if there's no interaction. Yeah. And the other thing I find disturbing at times, no offense, Gail or anybody else, when they don't have their video on, because I have no idea if they're asleep or not, Do you know what I mean? So that is certainly missing. You see a student, you see when they're on their phone or when they have their head down, you have no idea what people are doing. And some students claim, oh, I have bad internet connection, that's why I have to have the video off. And I don't believe them, but you can't prove it and you can't penalize them, Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but...
Yeah, really interesting points. Aidan, so you've got your virtual hand up.
I do, and thanks, Carly. Francisca, as has been said, there's a lovely comprehensive summary there of very many aspects. Just 2 things strike me. The first is that to date we have relatively little research done on the effects, quite obviously because there simply hasn't been time for people to conduct the research and to publish. So I presume that in the future we will see probably more differentiated research, for instance, intersectional approaches to the impact. There is certainly indications, as you said, that of the impact of gender and gender inequalities, but there may be also other inequalities of all kinds that we have yet to discover, whether based on ethnicity or type of work, and the sectors in which people are working, and so on and so forth. That's the first one, and then the second. Is it really a question to you? Do you think we're likely to see a breakdown in the traditional class structures, of the working classes and the middle classes, and a redefinition in terms of those who can and are permitted and will work from home, and those who are going to have to get up still at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., go out into the cold, get on public transport, expose themselves perhaps to ill health and contagion, and yet will have to work elsewhere. And that will be perhaps a class, the new class distinction.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Aidan. And it's very visible, this divide. And on the other hand, for example, those who are more remote but have good internet connection, have the resources like a laptop, they actually don't have to get up at 6 o'clock. They can stay in bed till 8 o'clock to go to their virtual lecture at 8:30. Yeah, and if you think about other countries, for example, in Australia and in parts of America, it's absolutely the norm that teaching and learning takes place virtually because of the distances. Yeah, even in Africa, in some of the remote villages, that people where children used to have to go to, I know that from Botswana, for example, I was involved with some work there. Instead of having to walk for 2 hours to their school, they can now virtually access. And so on one hand, new opportunities are opened up through the use of virtual media for teaching and learning. And there's a class divide on one hand, but also those who have been disadvantaged with the right support can actually become more equal. So there is a class divide, but I don't think it's the old black and white, or those who have money. And, I think it's much more complex and complicated and fragmented. I don't know the answer yet to that, but I think all teaching and learning will be revisited, how it is delivered from a teacher's point of view, lecturer's point of view, as well as the accessibility to those who are more remote and can access it. I think there will be a lot of reshaping. There will be a legacy of COVID in this one.
Yeah, Jenny.
Hi.
Yeah. Sorry, I did say Jenny.
Yes, further to what Aidan was saying, I think there is already a big divide between those who can use remote resources and actually have the resources to use. And that has nothing to do with what class they are, only how rich they are, which may not be the same thing. But can I add that my daughter is a doctor working in a hospital, and at some point during one or other of the lockdowns, she said that she realized how lucky she was to be able to go out to work, in fact, to be forced to go out to work, rather than being stuck at home all the time with a computer, which would have driven her mad. So although she still had to work some of the time, obviously at home, because that kept them safe, she actually felt quite privileged to be able to go out to work and meet people. Actually meet people and talk to people and react to people in the way that she always had, because the clinical team that she works with still had some clinics that they had to go to, so they obviously still saw each other. I mean, with all the usual, care taken and so on. But that was a different way. Sometimes it won't always be a privilege to stay at home at work, and I worry really how people will cope with staying at home and working at home all the time. I think we're social animals, and I think if people will have to work at home all the time and choose to, we're going to have to find different ways, I think, for workers and firms and simply people to meet up again.
And I think that's where the resilience part becomes so important, and promoting health and well-being. So I consider myself lucky that I have a 4-legged lodger, my rescue greyhound, who requires being walked at least 3 times a day. I'm not joking here, he has kept me mentally and physically healthy.
Yes.
And the other thing which I like socializing, but and that's an individual choice. I'm not the greatest person in an office and team worker. I find all the noises and chit chat very irritating and distracting. I rather work in peace and quiet from home. So the work bit from home works for me. But what is missing is the social aspect, which I had to reduce. But I've started something totally crazy. I started sea swimming on the 1st of January. Love it.
1st of January.
Yes, New Year's resolution, the first one I've ever stuck to. I'm wearing a short neoprene suit, I say in my defense. But I'm telling you, mentally and physically, to have this challenge and people sort of watching you and neighbors talking to you, that is a social event. I know it's totally crazy, but mentally you have achieved something which is not work related, you know. And it's physically so healthy, and apparently it helps to prevent dementia. I don't know if it's too late yet, but you know, I thought better late than never. So
it's not going in that bothers me, it's coming out. I need one of those big fur coat things.
Yeah. So it is, if we continue to work more and more remotely and isolated, we need to make sure that we have other outlets to stay safe, mentally healthy and physically. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you, Jenny. Sorry I talked too much.
Interesting. Any other questions? Oh, Anne.
Yeah, if that's okay. I've really enjoyed that and listening to the discussion. And indeed, Jenny and Francisca, you picked up on the two things that I wanted to say. Well, one is a comment really, and the other is a question. So the first thing is this thing about working at home, and I think, Francisca, you gave a really good example of it, that it's very difficult to force people and make them choose to do, or not give them a choice. Because you identified, Francisca, about not liking the office environment in some senses, therefore choosing, you know, on the days that I'm marking, I'm better not being in the building, I'm better being at home. But actually, I prefer to go to work every day because I actually like getting in the car with the radio on to clear my head on the way in and do the same on the way home. So this idea that it's going to work for everybody in the same way, I think that's my comment really, that I think that needs really careful consideration. The question I have is about resilience, because I always worry about the term resilience because it can pathologize people. So it can be used to pathologize people, should I say. So, you know, the suggestion is that when the going gets rough in the neoliberal climate and the performative climate, that, well, really, it's just because people weren't, you know, resilient enough. When children find it hard to deal with the examination system and the pressures that are placed upon them, it's not the pressures that are at fault, it's the children, you know, they're not as resilient. You know, they're the kinds of discourses. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that, what you know, whether that's something that you have more to say about, because I am really genuinely interested in it.
I think the example you just gave by saying, oh, they're not resilient, or then that is a judgment which doesn't help anyone. Yeah. So it is about, you know, that's where schools, colleges, universities actually need to think about ways how they can foster and nurture resilience. And resilience is sort of helping people to cope with unpredictability. Yeah, to bounce back from the adversities of life. That's what I like about it. You are not born with it, but you can learn skills. But if nobody teaches you the skills, how are you supposed to become more resilient? So the schools can't say, oh, your child is not resilient or whatever, when they haven't, part of the curriculum, when they haven't taught them resilience. Yeah. So, and it's not necessarily, it's a combination. It's there's more or less a genetic disposition. Some people are more resilient than others. There's the environment, so it's a nature-nurture debate. You know, what coping mechanism and strategies and problem-solving strategies children learn from those around them, which is home and school. But I'm a big promoter for saying schools need to teach children coping strategies, problem-solving strategies, which then helps them to become more resilient. And it's, in short, it's, you know, the I can or I can't attitude. And the Penn research, which was started originally by Seligman, has done lots and lots of research. And I can send you a whole reading list of how they have written how schools can promote resilient thinking, because that's the first step, moving away from the I can't to yes, I can, let's give it a go. And if I fail the first time, it's not a failure. It is learning from experience and and reflective thinking and moving forward. But this is not taught in school. In school, you do your maths and English and reading, and it's right or wrong. There is very little problem solving of emotional, social situation. The problem solving is only reduced to maths. 1 and 1 is 2. Yeah. So that's what in my view is missing from the curriculum, and schools maybe should consider to make it sort of like life lessons, whatever they want to call it. But in America,
be on the league table. Will it be on the league table? If it doesn't get the right results for the league table, they won't teach it.
Will Ofsted give it a special rating if the children are more resilient? No, it's these soft skills which are much more important than numeracy and literacy. It is important, numeracy and literacy, but soft skills, and that's where we can talk about our education system. And I can go off on a little tangent where I think, you know, the multiple intelligence concept is totally not addressed in our education system. It is actually a very, it's like an education factory. And what's his name? I can't think. He just recently died. He was really good. He talked about creativity. So he's brilliant. I can't think of his name now. Anyway, so people throw out around the word resilience without actually identifying what are we talking about. Is it problem-solving skill? Is it the emotional intelligence? Yeah, all these things which are generally not taught in school. So teachers shouldn't really say, "Oh, your child is not resilient." Yeah, they should think about ways helping children to learn resilience and helping parents to help their children to become resilient.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered your question, Anne.
Some really interesting points, and Summer's here listening in, and her PhD is evaluating or looking at mental health intervention at school that's trying to teach those kinds of concepts through movement, which is
right, yes.
So I bet she'll be
so important. Yeah, so important. Yeah. Or any physical activity, because that's a mind and body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you were mentioning body, I was really interested. I'm like, this is exactly why. But just to go back on resilience, I feel like it's definitely they call it the R word, and a lot of people are kind of hesitant to use it in this time and place, especially when you look at what's going on right now in medicine and kind of doctors and the resilience that they're told to upkeep when there's kind of a burnout and other, you know, mental health things that are impacting their well-being and mental health. And the word is kind of used as a buffer as opposed to like the systematic negligence that's, you know, in place. So I think resilience is a very interesting word when it comes to well-being, because it can.
I think we just missed the end of what you said, Summer, but I think it was a really it's a really interesting a whole other presentation, I think, so, and definitely something that I think you can follow up. So so we'll draw the session to a close. I think Anne has got a few words to say before we all leave, but yeah, I'll hand over to you, Anne, I think.
Okay, so can we just say thanks to Francisca? It was really fabulous. I know we've already done our kind of electronic clap, but thank you so much. I know you were worried about it, and it was really wonderful. So thanks so much.